What happens when the unthinkable becomes reality? As Ukraine pushes beyond its borders into Russia, the entire world holds its breath. Could this be the spark that ignites a global conflict, or is there a deeper strategy at play? Stick around because what we're about to reveal will shock you. Welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the most critical global events shaping our world today. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss our latest updates. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you find it informative. Now let's unravel the potential consequences of Ukraine's bold move into Russian territory. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. The world has been closely watching the escalating tensions between Ukraine and Russia, but few could have predicted the bold and unprecedented move Ukraine has now taken. By crossing into Russian territory, Ukraine has shattered the status quo, sending shockwaves across the globe. This daring act isn't just a military maneuver, it's a direct challenge to one of the most powerful nations on Earth, a nation with deep historical ties to Ukraine and a significant arsenal at its disposal. To fully grasp the gravity of this situation, we need to step back and understand the intricate web of alliances, historical grievances, and strategic interests at play. Since the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Ukraine has been on the front lines of a geopolitical struggle that has pitted the West against Russia in a high-stakes game of brinkmanship. For years, Ukraine has fought to defend its sovereignty, but the decision to go on the offensive, to take the fight into Russian territory, marks a dramatic escalation that could have far-reaching consequences. This isn't just about two countries clashing over borders. It's about the future of Europe, the balance of power in the post-Cold War world, and the very real possibility of a global conflict. The move by Ukraine could be seen as an act of desperation, a calculated risk, or even a strategic masterstroke designed to force Russia's hand. But whatever the intention, the outcomes are far from certain, and the potential for catastrophic miscalculations looms large. The international community is now faced with a rapidly evolving situation that could spiral out of control at any moment. Will NATO be drawn into the conflict? Could Russia retaliate with overwhelming force? Or will this spark internal dissent that could weaken Putin's grip on power? And most terrifying of all, could this confrontation escalate to the point where nuclear weapons are brought into the equation? As we explore the 12 possible scenarios that could unfold, it's crucial to recognize that we are entering uncharted territory. The decisions made in the coming days and weeks will shape the future of not just Ukraine and Russia, but the entire world. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the potential consequences couldn't be more severe. So let's delve into the possibilities and consider what could happen now that Ukraine has crossed the Rubicon and entered Russian soil. 1. Escalation to full-scale war. Imagine the unthinkable. Ukrainian forces push deeper into Russian territory, and Moscow retaliates with overwhelming force. What starts as localized skirmishes quickly escalates into a full-scale war that engulfs the entire region. Russia, armed with one of the most formidable military arsenals in the world, could launch massive airstrikes, deploy ground troops, and even mobilize its nuclear-capable forces. The potential for mass casualties on both sides is horrifying, and the conflict could rapidly spread beyond Ukraine and Russia, dragging neighboring countries into the fray. NATO, bound by its commitment to defend its Eastern European members, might find itself drawn into direct confrontation with Russian forces. This scenario doesn't just threaten Eastern Europe. It could spark the most significant military conflict on the continent since World War II, with consequences that would reverberate across the globe. 2. International diplomatic crisis. The Ukrainian incursion into Russia could ignite a diplomatic firestorm of unprecedented scale. Global powers would be forced to take sides, and international alliances could fracture under the pressure. The United Nations might convene emergency sessions, with some countries condemning Ukraine's actions, while others support them as a necessary response to Russian aggression. The Security Council, already divided, could become paralyzed, unable to agree on a path forward. Meanwhile, countries with vested interests in the region, like China and Turkey, might use the crisis to advance their own geopolitical agendas. The diplomatic fallout could lead to a new Cold War, where nations align themselves into opposing blocs, reminiscent of the East versus West divide of the mid-20th century. In this volatile atmosphere, even the smallest misstep could lead to global chaos. 3. Cyber warfare. In the digital age, wars aren't just fought on the battlefield, they're also waged in cyberspace. In retaliation for Ukraine's incursion, Russia could unleash a devastating wave of cyber attacks against Ukraine and its Western allies. These attacks could target critical infrastructure, power grids, communication networks, financial systems, causing widespread disruption and panic. Imagine entire cities plunged into darkness, financial markets in freefall, and vital communication channels severed, leaving millions isolated and vulnerable. The chaos wouldn't be confined to Ukraine. The interconnected nature of modern economies means that a successful cyber attack on one nation could have cascading effects worldwide. Moreover, these cyber attacks could blur the lines of traditional warfare, making it difficult to determine when a cyber operation constitutes an act of war, further complicating international relations and raising the stakes of the conflict. 4. Economic collapse. The economic consequences of this conflict could be catastrophic. Russia, a major player in global energy markets, could use its control over oil and gas supplies as a weapon, cutting off exports to Europe and driving energy prices to unprecedented levels. Europe, heavily reliant on Russian energy, would face crippling shortages, forcing businesses to shut down and plunging the continent into a deep recession. The global economy, already fragile, could teeter on the brink of collapse as markets panic, inflation skyrockets, and supply chains break down. The ripple effects would be felt everywhere, from rising food prices in Africa to collapsing stock markets in Asia. This economic warfare could trigger a worldwide depression, leading to mass unemployment, social unrest, and a wave of populist movements that could destabilize governments around the globe. 5. Humanitarian crisis. As the conflict intensifies, the human cost could be staggering. Millions of civilians caught in the crossfire could be forced to flee their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. These displaced people would flood into neighboring countries, overwhelming humanitarian agencies and causing widespread suffering. The scenes could be harrowing. Families torn apart, children separated from their parents, and entire communities reduced to rubble. The international community would struggle to provide adequate aid, and the sheer scale of the crisis could lead to the spread of diseases, food shortages, and an increase in human trafficking. The long-term effects on the region's population would be devastating, with a lost generation of children growing up in refugee camps, their futures uncertain and their psyches scarred by the trauma of war. 6. Russian political turmoil. Ukraine's bold move could have profound internal consequences for Russia. Putin's grip on power, once seemingly unassailable, could weaken as the Russian public grows weary of a prolonged and costly conflict. Economic sanctions, military casualties, and growing unrest could fuel opposition movements within Russia, leading to widespread protests and civil unrest. The Kremlin, facing mounting pressure, might resort to harsh crackdowns, further eroding public support. In the most extreme scenario, this could lead to a coup, with factions within the military or political elite seeking to depose Putin and install a new leader. The power vacuum could plunge Russia into chaos, with rival factions vying for control, and the country's vast nuclear arsenal becoming a terrifying wildcard in an already unstable situation. 7. NATO Intervention. The possibility of NATO intervention looms large over the conflict. As a collective defense alliance, NATO could be compelled to act if the conflict threatens its member states or if Russian aggression escalates beyond Ukraine. This intervention could take many forms, from supplying Ukraine with advanced weaponry to deploying troops to Eastern Europe as a deterrent against further Russian advances. However, any direct military engagement between NATO and Russia would be fraught with danger, raising the specter of a broader war between nuclear-armed superpowers. Even the mere presence of NATO forces in the region could be seen by Russia as an existential threat, potentially provoking a disproportionate response. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error is terrifyingly thin. 8. Chinese involvement. China, Russia's strategic ally, could play a pivotal role in the unfolding crisis. If the conflict threatens China's interests, such as its economic investments in Russia or its broader geopolitical strategy, Beijing might decide to intervene. This could take the form of diplomatic support, economic aid, or even military assistance to Russia. Alternatively, China could use the conflict as an opportunity to assert its dominance in other regions, such as the South China Sea or Taiwan, while the West is preoccupied with the crisis in Europe. China's involvement could shift the balance of power, creating a new axis of influence that challenges the Western-led world order. This scenario could lead to a new global power struggle, with the potential to reshape international relations for decades to come. 9. Nuclear threat. The most terrifying scenario of all is the potential use of nuclear weapons. If Russia feels that its sovereignty is under existential threat, it might resort to its nuclear arsenal as a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the conflict. The consequences of such a decision would be catastrophic, not just for Ukraine and Russia, but for the entire world. A nuclear strike, even if limited in scope, could trigger a chain reaction of retaliatory strikes, leading to a full-scale nuclear war. The devastation would be unimaginable, with millions of lives lost and entire cities reduced to ash. The fallout, both literal and figurative, would plunge the world into a new dark age, with long-lasting effects on the environment, global health, and the very fabric of civilization. 10. Proxy wars in Eastern Europe. The conflict between Ukraine and Russia could inspire other separatist movements in Eastern Europe, leading to a series of proxy wars across the region. Countries with existing ethnic or political tensions, like Moldova, Belarus, or the Baltic states, could become new flashpoints in a broader struggle for influence between Russia and the West. These proxy wars would be brutal, with external powers arming and funding local militias to fight their battles. The region could descend into a patchwork of conflicts, with no clear front lines and no easy solutions. The human cost would be immense, and the instability could spread, threatening the fragile peace in Europe and creating new waves of refugees and economic hardship. The echoes of these conflicts could reverberate for generations, leaving a legacy of division and hatred. 11. Peace talks and negotiations. Despite the escalating tensions, there's still a glimmer of hope that cooler heads could prevail. The severity of the situation might force both sides to the negotiating table, leading to renewed peace talks. These negotiations would be fraught with difficulty, as both Ukraine and Russia would have to make significant concessions to reach a lasting agreement. The international community, desperate to avoid a larger conflict, would likely play a crucial role in mediating these talks, offering incentives for peace and threatening sanctions for continued aggression. While the road to peace would be long and difficult, a successful agreement could finally bring stability to the region and prevent further bloodshed. However, the chances of this scenario depend on the willingness of both sides to compromise, and the outcome is far from guaranteed. 12. Long-term occupation. If Ukraine succeeds in holding on to the territory it has seized, it could lead to a long-term occupation that fundamentally alters the dynamics of the region. This occupation wouldn't be easy. Ukraine would face fierce resistance from Russian forces and local militias, leading to a protracted conflict with no clear end in sight. The occupied territories could become hotbeds of insurgency, with guerrilla warfare and sabotage becoming everyday occurrences. The international community would be divided on how to respond, with some supporting Ukraine's right to self-defense and others condemning the occupation as illegal and destabilizing. The economic and human toll of this occupation would be immense, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The region could be plunged into a cycle of violence and retribution, with peace remaining a distant and elusive goal. The situation between Ukraine and Russia is a powder keg waiting to explode. Each of these scenarios presents a different path the conflict could take, with consequences that could reverberate around the world. What do you think is the most likely outcome? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to smash that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most pressing issues. And remember to hit the notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop our next video. Stay informed, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.